So I guess let's kick it off with the question of du jour. What is decentralized social?
Okay, cool. Well, thanks everyone for coming, and thanks for inviting me here and having me here. I guess decentralized social is essentially just social as we know it, just built with decentralized technologies, and that's kind of the most concise way I would put it.
I guess I think the interesting question is, what are the value that it brings to the user, to the developers as well, and why would we want more and more people to care about that?
I think there's two main buckets of people, just like you mentioned. There's developers and there's users, and I think that both of them combined can potentially spark a lot of innovation and a lot of really interesting apps that are being built, and a lot of people that kind of have missed and maybe lost their profiles and their identity in different ways, or maybe just are tired of rebuilding their presence across new social apps every time a new one launches, can kind of get a lot of value out of Web3 social. So I guess from the perspective of a user, one of the interesting things is that with traditional social, every time a new application comes online, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, whatever, you have to kind of rebuild your social graph. And a lot of people have kind of been able to do that, but it's actually time consuming and it's kind of annoying to have to do that over and over. So with Web3 social, decentralized social, your follower graph is following you essentially across all the new applications that are built on that network. So for Lens, we have over 100 UIs that are built. I would say around 10 or so are probably production ready in terms of competing with something like Twitter. But that's still a decent number considering the protocol is still in closed beta and it's only been around for about a year. So when a new experience launches on a Web3 social protocol, then you have new ways to express yourself. You might have an exciting new way to kind of create content, and you don't have to actually invest years of your time rebuilding your audience to try it out. You can try it out that day, and if you like it, you stay there. If not, it doesn't really matter because you don't have to kind of invest all that time. Another thing is just knowing that you can go to sleep at night and wake up the next day knowing that your profile is not going to go away. No one can delete your profile. It's just impossible because that's just how blockchains work. People have had their profiles stolen or deleted or hacked or whatever. Yeah. And I guess you could get your profile hacked in Web3 if your wallet is hacked. But no one can actually just go in and decide that you're no longer going to be on the platform. Elon Musk tweeted a few months ago that if you tweet about certain things, then you're going to get your I guess, profile banned. So one of those things was if you were going to be talking about other social networks, then your profile could be banned. And imagine building up your following over the course of 5 or 10 years, and then someone arbitrarily coming up with a reason why they can take away your profile. And then also people that live in countries where they're afraid to speak out about government stuff, potentially being censored is an issue that some people might have. But I think one of the most interesting things is that you can experiment with a lot of different applications without having to rebuild your audience. And then there's also the whole aspect of monetization. So you have the ability to connect directly with your followers and be able to earn money. So with this idea of a collect, which is kind of in the same, I mean, we've probably heard collects, but in the past, people were more focused on NFTs that were really expensive, and maybe a few people would participate in that ecosystem. But with the scale of something like Web3 with hundreds of thousands or millions of users, you can actually have collects that cost 25 cents, 10 cents, or $1 that add up to a lot, that can provide a lot of value to both the person that's creating as well as collecting. So for example, we've had people that have just posted something like they would on Twitter, and they've set a collect fee of $1, and they've had tens of thousands of people collect that. So for something that took them a few seconds to write, they made $20,000. And you just can't do that directly through traditional social.
Yeah, I mean, definitely to kind of contrast, decentralized social, we just saw Threads launching, right? And you needed to rebuild your social graph there again.
Yeah, and who knows, a year or two from now,
yeah, they shut it down.
How popular Threads will be, or if it'll even be there at all. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Google Plus is a great example. Google Plus launched, you build all your, I build a bunch of circles, all those things, and then never mind. it's not that interesting, right? So I think there's definitely the platform risks, but like it is indeed not the biggest attractor, right? And so the question is, for the getting adoption, at least like I personally think users will not be the first who will like go after it, right? It is the developers who actually want to build in this environment, and it's easier for them to build. And so I guess, I mean, obviously you're on DevRel's side, so you believe in the same thing, but it's interesting to kind of explore kind of what is the benefits developers get if they can build on this more open social infrastructure, and how does that links to the eventual user adoption?
Okay, so first of all, the idea of like social is way more compelling as a use case than anything else in blockchain and Web3 at all, because everyone in the world, 4.95 billion people on the internet, all are already using social applications. So it's not something you have to explain and get them to understand. It's something they can pick up and grok right away. And now, if we want to kind of bring an application that the average person would want to use, it needs to be as good or better than what they're already using in the past. So therefore, we have to provide like the user experience that is as good or better than something like Twitter. And I think that with the combination of a lot of the improvements that we've been seeing at the infrastructure and the UI layer, I would say, with all types of stuff that are happening around account abstraction, but also gasless transactions and signless transactions, meaning that you can kind of like authorize posts that are non-financial to be sent through an authentication or access token as opposed to signing a transaction. You can provide like the same user experience or better than a traditional social app. So you have for the first time a use case that is accessible and understood by everyone in the world, that also leverages and gives a lot of benefits that are not possible through centralized infrastructures. So for people that are wanting to build applications that can potentially become popular, this is really compelling for a lot of developers. So we have hundreds of developers already building on Lens, probably thousands, I would say, because we have hundreds of apps. And it's really simple to also get started building. And for developers, I would say some of the main value propositions are, first of all, you don't have to build your entire ecosystem from scratch. You already have 100,000 or so built-in users in closed beta. In the future, that will be probably, we're guessing, right, millions. Because once anyone can sign up, it'll be permissionless. So you have like this built-in user base, so you don't have to bootstrap that from scratch, number one. Number two, you don't have to build out the infrastructure yourself either. If you've ever built in traditional like Web 2 or whatever you would want to call that, you might have used services like Auth0 for authentication and authorization. You might have used Twilio for messaging. You might have used AWS serverless functions for execution. You might have used something like Vercel for continuous integration. You have all these cloud services that abstract away a lot of complex functionality, so you can focus on delivering something cool. And that's kind of what Web3 social infrastructure does. It provides a layer for all of these features that you would want to build, but you don't have to build them from scratch. So you can just focus on building your mobile app or your web app. You don't have to build any backend at all. You don't have to have a backend developer. You don't have to have a database engineer. You don't need a QA engineer. You don't need any of that stuff on the back end. So you can come in as a team of one, and we already have teams of one raising at millions of dollars, like for apps that they've built, which is crazy, on Lens. And it's only possible because they don't have to build out that infrastructure. It's just less work. So you can build faster, you can iterate more quickly, you can do so with less people. You already have that built-in audience. And one of the things that we're doing, and I think that other Web3 social products should do, is provide like a really high-quality developer experience. So you can't expect them to interact directly with the blockchain. You want to give them APIs, you want to give them SDKs, you want to give them tools and all types of stuff where they can easily and quickly build applications. So combining all that stuff together, people are coming to hackathons and building stuff, and some of those apps are getting funded, and some of them are becoming successful, and it's just like a completely different area, I think, of expertise than what we've traditionally seen, which is mainly like financial.
But I think that the interesting thing here, because you can, as a team of one, build something interesting, and at the same time you're leveraging this common platform. You don't need now to build a venture scale startup. You don't need to aim for your own tens of millions, hundreds of millions of users. You can be targeting a more niche kind of use cases and still leverage all the same infrastructure that as if you were like targeting hundreds of millions of users, right? So I think like that's the really interesting benefit here that kind of decouples almost the part, like if you're trying to build Facebook, like compete with Facebook, right? You need to be able to scale to that. You need to hire, similar like workforce. You need to have all those things. And here you kind of have that in more decentralized way, like more people contributing to the core protocols. And then you can actually focus on the specific use case that you want to deliver on. And then, that becoming kind of a platform of many of those use cases. I think from my perspective, I think the adoption will come through more of this niche use cases working together versus like one that actually like heads-on competes with like Twitter or Facebook, because the reality is like those are pretty good, and like the use case of like deplatformization sadly is, I mean not sadly, it's good, it's not very popular, but like it only, like people only care about being deplatformized when they get that, right? And mostly they don't. But I think this niche use cases where you can like, hey, we're a knitting community and we really want to have our own economy thrown together, and like we want to connect through social, and we want to build something around that, right? Like right now, building that, right, would be like really expensive because you need to do all of the stack and maintain it and manage it, and you need to get users to join. And I think using this decentralized social as kind of a concept and leveraging some of this SDKs, APIs, it really allows, like a team of mind to put it together.
There's always this chicken and the egg problem. Like you build something that if it's social and you want users, but people don't want to join unless there's already people there. So what happens when you build something from scratch? You have to kind of start completely over. So starting from a big user base is like a big value prop for sure.
Exactly, yeah. So you mentioned monetization, right? I think there's interesting, because there's like different aspects of monetization. There's like, let's say this niche use case, I'm a developer building and like maybe raising money or not. But also there's the creator side, right? Which, and we see Twitter is kind of trying to innovate on this, and like others, obviously there's, some of the Pantheon and others who've been trying to do this for a while. Like how do you see kind of Web3 like kind of, to me it's really interesting because Web3 is like, in theory, should have been replacing Patreon like, years ago, but it still hasn't happened. So like what do you think, and from the decentralized social lens, like where do you see this kind of creator monetization going?
Well, there's a lot of stuff you can do. You can do stuff directly on the platform already, and you can essentially obviously connect with people and pay them because you already have their address. You can send payments to them. You can support them by collecting the stuff that they're building. You can actually share stuff on Lens and set a collect fee to go to someone else and raise money permissionlessly without them even knowing. For example, we posted an image that was created for us that we paid the artist to create, and then we shared it separately and we set the collect address to them, and for $1 you could collect, and they made like a few tens of thousands of dollars, maybe like $10,000 or $15,000 or something like that from that, directly native to the platform. And I think it would just make really a lot of sense to have your follower graph integrated into a payment app like, I don't know, like Cash App or Venmo, because those are my friends in my social graph already. Maybe I want to send them some money, and then I add a new person, and they're now like on my social graph as well. It could be like a follower. There's just a lot of opportunity when you have all of these things already interconnected that you don't have to start, again, rebuilding from scratch.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the interesting question is like, how do we go beyond that? Like we have this token-gated communities, right, that existed, but like then the NFTs themselves became like a whole speculation game. But the communities were on Discord, they were on forums, like they were not using, like they were not really connected to the kind of the decentralized tissue that you have. And so I think there's an interesting question as kind of this decentralized social stack matures, you have more and more native kind of use cases where potentially, you borrow a token to participate in a community while you're playing a game, and then, like while you enter this room on chain, for example, in the game, you're like part of this chat and group, like where you can see what people are discussing. Like things like that, like become more kind of integrated and composable, right? That right now, again, like if you try to, like you would only build that in your own silo. You would not be able to build that as kind of a big network.
Yeah, we're seeing already, for instance, Orb has Orb communities. So if you hold like certain NFTs, you're automatically entered into a community, and they have a really beautiful user interface to browse the communities that you're in. So for example, the first one was around ETH Denver when this thing launched, and you could see all the activity from anyone that was at ETH Denver within its own feed. Developer DAO has its own feed on Orb, so anyone that's in Developer DAO is posting there, and it's kind of like a separate tab in the mobile app. And yeah, there's a lot of, I would say, focus around exactly that right now for us to kind of make that even better.
Yeah, I mean, for me also, like I always said, for me, DAOs are Facebook groups with a bank account, except they didn't have the like actual social part. Like, if you go to DAOs, like it's just proposals and votes, and there's no like the discussion about why are we doing it, what are we doing it, and that all the discussions happen somewhere else. And
yeah,
like,
everything is on Discord.
Yeah, everything is on Discord. People there have no like, accountability and traceability for that. Like yeah, I mean, there's Collabland and a few other tools to like kind of link these things, but it's all very disconnected. I think that yeah, as this kind of structures now, you have discussion. Maybe like during East Denver, the communities like pulls together money, maybe helps fund like few more people to come in to the city, things like that, right? You can have like a more interactive kind of decision making and action happening.
Yeah, we're also working on kind of like different widgets and stuff that can be integrated into other applications to create conversations. So there's like Discus. Have you heard of Discus?
Yeah.
So we're basically building out kind of like a Discus-like widget that is all essentially on Lens, and other social networks could build something similar, and I think that's a really cool use case as well.
So speaking of widgets, so I mean, you've seen our kind of block shareability system front ends, and so there's actually already Lens components available there.
Yeah, one of the winners of the hackathon that we just had built one of those.
Yeah.
And it was really cool.
And so I think that the interesting thing here is there can be multiple decentralized social protocols, but because they're all open, they're all interoperable. They all can work together. There's no actual limitation of like, hey, Twitter and Facebook will never be able to like interface and interact. And so I guess like the interesting question is, and I think kind of there's actually that winner is actually working on the next thing, which is merging Lens feed and near social feed into one place, so you can actually have like different protocols feeding into one feed, and then you can have kind of different ranker algorithms and stuff like this around that. So I think that's one of the points is like open is like you can, when you're already in an open web, open world, right, you can now kind of really compose these things in an easy way and then build up different front ends and then pull them into different existing Web 2 applications as well. So you can have all this composability that you don't really have, or like, sometimes you have Facebook had APIs and then they decided not to have them. Kind of you don't have this change of the rules.
Yeah. I think one of the worst things about building on someone else's API is that you just don't know what's going to happen the next day. It could be completely cut off or shut down forever, or they could jack the price up like we saw recently with Twitter and Reddit, companies going out of business because everything just completely changed. But when the data is public and open, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah, I mean, for those who've like been using Twitter for a while, like there's TweetDeck, right, was the app that for a while was like a pretty preferred actually UI for Twitter, but then Twitter changed their API rules, and that company, I think it either went out of business or needed to sell to Twitter.
I don't know if it was TweetDeck, but it was one of those big ones, yeah.
Yeah, like they literally needed to like pretty much shut down their business because they couldn't hold API for the cost they were offering to the user. And so that's kind of very interesting case where there's an experience that was like literally built by a smaller team better than the core team of Twitter, and they kind of just like, in a way destroyed their company.
Yeah, because the value is flowing outside of their client, their advertising and stuff like that. So they just jack it up to the point where either if they pay it, they're going to still make a ton of money, or if they don't pay it, they don't care, because those users are going to obviously end up coming back to their app. And that's the whole thing. Like, you have no control over that with any of this stuff. You can wake up tomorrow, they could change, you could be using it for 10 years, they could change the recommendation algorithm, and you can now get a feed of like content that you just absolutely hate. I think that a lot of people—
Speaking from experience?
I think a lot of people have been complaining in the last 6 months some people actually are not. Some people like it, But that's the thing. Like, you don't have a choice. Either you like it, you hate it. You don't have a choice. The recommendation algorithm on Twitter has changed. It's showing more like inflammatory content, fighting videos, stuff like this. Some people don't want to see that stuff, and you don't really have a choice. But with public data, anyone can build a recommendation algorithm, and there can be a marketplace of recommendation algorithms. And this isn't theoretical. This is literally already what's happening. There's dozens of recommendation algorithms now available for Lens. All these clients are picking up their own. You can pick and choose which one you want to use. And then you as a user are not locked in. You can build your audience, continue building your following, and consume the content in a way that you like.
Yeah, and I think this is definitely powerful, again, in this open world where we really trying to get user to have a choice and kind of be able to decide what they want, right? And right now, there's a lot of small decisions that as a user you don't actually know even that you had an option because like the product just decides for you, and like all these products are optimized for maximizing revenue for the company.
Yes.
Like at the end.
And this is interesting because people actually in the traditional Web 2 world make fun of decentralization for the longest time. But what you saw on Threads a week ago is that they are now pivoting to a model of decentralization. They want to implement ActivityPub for the stated reason of being able to port your social graph into different client applications. Also, supposedly censorship resistance, even though ActivityPub can be censored, literally someone can go and delete your profile. But their stated purpose now on Threads from the CTO is that they want to move into a decentralized architecture. Jack Dorsey founded Twitter, then he founded Blue Sky, and now he's founded Nader, moving more into the area of decentralization. Here you have the two biggest founders in the entire world of social, both moving into decentralization. But the decentralization architecture that they're building is not permissionless, it's not mutable, and it's not censorship resistant. So they recognize that the value proposition there, but they still want some control. So I think that's a really bullish actual case, even though we don't like a lot of the stuff that Facebook and Instagram and Twitter have done in the past. Seeing the biggest social companies in the world move in that direction is a very, very strong signal that we're on the right track.
Yeah, and I think, for a lot of them, it's also this interesting conundrum where as more users come, right, there's more difference of opinions, and some things become not safe, and you need to now moderate and create some, form of trust and safety. And the problem is, Facebook needed to pretty much moderate the world, right? And it's very different. They needed to have an opinion on every, as a company, they needed to have an opinion on every single thing happening in the world, right? And that opinion, it always would be wrong because there's always multiple sides about something, right? And so they were always under constant attack. Same happened with Reddit, same as with Twitter, right? And so the reality is the centralized platforms are also not able to, and they shouldn't be in position of becoming the moderators of the world, right, of the conversation. Elon Musk, his narrative around taking over Twitter was that hey, they're censoring, and they're limiting the freedom of speech, but then he himself starts to well, you're going to be banned for this, or you're going to be kicked out for that, or don't talk about this, right? And it's well, that's not consistent. And so the question here, again, with this, you can have different applications which represent different communities. You can also have more community moderation where that, for different aspects, maybe different community members and leaders can be deciding what are the things, and you can be choosing which leaders you follow.
Yeah, you actually have the choice.
Yeah, you have the choice. So we're going back to the core value of what we're trying to do with Open Web. So I think that's as extremely important as we're doing it. And this is why, actually, although Threads and Blue Sky are saying they want to put it on ActivityPub, etc., they're not actually doing that. They're not actually going all in into the
Well, one of the problems with ActivityPub in the implementation of Mastodon is that you have these I forgot what they're called. Yeah, they're federated. Yeah. And you have the people that are running each server have full control over everything. So, for instance, they can read all of your direct messages. like they're not encrypted and they can see everything that's happening, they can ban you for arbitrary reasons. So for instance, someone I follow that has a big following on Twitter got on Mastodon, and a week later, he was banned because someone thought he was a capitalist, whatever that means. And he literally had his account deleted, and that was it. And it's gone.
Was it on main
so, like,
Mastodon.com? Like
on
the main,
it was on Mastodon.
Well, on main server? Or on
I don't really
server?
know. I don't know enough about it, but I just thought that was like really, really stupid.
Yeah, for something that was like, pretty much claiming to be a replacement for Twitter's kind of censorship. That was a very bad move. Yeah, so exactly. I think like leveraging, all the innovation blockchain technology that, people have been building is definitely allowing to have like a way better architecture and allowing to actually have the censorship-resistant property, have the kind of availability and accessibility, and then build on top different clients that are actually like linked into the same identity, kind of that's shared all the data.
Yeah, and it's trustless. You don't have to trust Mark Zuckerberg to say, hey, I'm going to do this. You don't have to trust anybody. You just trust the actual math or the code, and that's it.
Yeah. So I guess like where do you see we going from here? Like when I mean, we have a 1 billion user goal, so but I think the interesting question is like when do we see like interesting applications that gaining traction with non-Web3 communities, right?
So I think that we need to do a lot of work around wallets and identity, and I think that what you all have done with the Near wallet that I had seen not too long ago is exactly in the right direction. People need to be able to permissionlessly create wallets without actually going through all of the UX that they currently have to deal with around private keys. And there's a lot of ways that people are trying to accomplish this. But my brother or my mom or my wife or something like that, for me to tell them to go try this app out, they don't need to go and do like 30 hours of research around private keys and identity, like security and like hacking and all. They should be able to click a button and start using the app. So once we get there, I think that we're starting to become in the right direction. We already have applications and protocols that are implementing gasless and signless transactions. Near is already kind of doing this sort of thing. Lens is doing that. So once we get beyond the actual, issues with identity and UX, we already have the applications that are really, really high quality on Lens, and other social networks are already actually there, Web3 social. So once we get the identity part there, I think we're going to be headed in the right direction. I think also the big challenge up until recently was scale. So if you actually put an entire social network on the blockchain, it's not going to work. Because if you look at how much transactions, or how many transactions, in my opinion at least, what basically Twitter is doing is 50,000 transactions per second at peak. You have to find some way to deal with that scale, and there isn't a blockchain that exists today that can handle that. In my opinion, maybe theoretically, but we've never seen it in practice,
That's
right?
True, yeah.
So what do you have to do? You have to find innovative solutions for that. So I think with all of the new data availability solutions, you have things like bundler network on AAVE, which is what we're using, but you also have stuff like Celestia and Polygon Avail that can be used as kind of like data availability. And also I think what Arbitrum Nova did is kind of interesting, to where you can kind of achieve like the high throughput at the very low cost while keeping the characteristics of censorship resistance, immutability, and permanence. Then that's kind of what you need, and you need to kind of combine those things together. And we're just now starting to see that happen. So like I think we can handle 35 or 38,000 or so transactions per second already, and that's going to continue getting better. And I think that's the type of scale that you need to kind of have to make this real world.
Yeah, for sure. And we started Near with that exact point that like we need to figure out how to provide data availability and execution that can scale 2 billion users and actually like over time continue increasing capacity, not just become like a choke point by whatever the users are doing. And so I totally agree that like that kind of, as this technology is mature, we'll also see the kind of like usability in general becoming more accessible, because like at the end actually the current capacity problems is a usability problem. Like it ends up, like if it costs $10, right, to do something, that's a usability problem at the end. So yeah, totally agree.
Yep. So in general, I think the way is kind of treating blockchains as infrastructure, like we treat AWS and Google Cloud and all these other database software as a service. The user doesn't know anything about that. It's just an underlying thing, and they're not interacting with it, right? Like there's an API that's doing all that work, and they're just talking to the app. And I think that's the general architecture that we need to be moving towards also.
Yeah, I mean, the kind of the way we frame it is like there's a whole open web stack, right, that happens on top where blockchain is kind of kernel of it, and you build all the other layers that provide gasless transactions, that provide data availability, that provide kind of data access, indexing, all of those APIs on top in a way that still maintains the same kind of values and properties of the blockchain, right? That it's censorship resistant, or like from a data availability perspective, and it's low to zero switching cost. Like if one of the servers or API servers goes down, you can switch to a new one, and it gives you exactly the same APIs, and like you don't need to rebuild the full stack on top of it. So I think that kind of concept is really important because although there's a lot of applications in Web3 who use blockchain, but then the stack they build on top actually does not satisfy these properties, right?
Right.
Like you cannot actually run like OpenSea yourself. Like if OpenSea front end goes down, yes, smart contracts are there, but like the rest of the stack is not, and you cannot
that's a good point.
replicate it, right? So I think that's a really important. Like, hey, it's not just the blockchain. The Web3 or open web stack is actually like all of those pieces coming together and kind of providing you the full solution, but leveraging this, common identity, kind of common properties.
That's a good way to frame it. Yeah.
All right. I think we are pretty much at time, so thanks a lot, and hopefully this was helpful, and you guys all build or use near and lens social to really bring this kind of open web to life.
Thank you.